Thank you very much, Richard. Good morning to everyone. I mean, when you see the buzz in the room and the networking which started immediately after a very insightful speech of President Poroshenko, I'm almost sorry to break it up, but I think that with such a fantastic participation and high-level speakers, I really would like to thank Richard to get us back in the room and start the session. After listening to the speech of the President and after seeing that animation on our screens, I just decided not to take or use my a bit technical notes to address you, but really to speak as a friend of Ukraine, as a neighbor from Slovakia, as a European, as a Vice President of the European Commission. At first, we are really living through these difficult times with Ukraine. And I have to say, to see what this country achieved over the last few years, despite the war going on at the eastern border, is simply remarkable. Because the progress which is achieved in this country is being done and being achieved under very difficult circumstances. And we have to simply bear in mind when we are assessing the progress of Ukraine that 5 million of Ukrainians are daily affected by this war, and they are living in extremely difficult conditions. Therefore, I really would like to pay tribute to Ukrainians, to the Ukrainian leadership, and especially to the Ukrainian people for going through this reform, for going through this transformation, because I think if we would use any kind of measure, and sometimes we can be very critical when we are coming from abroad, sometimes we can be very critical coming from the European Commission, but if we really want to be fair, we have to say that over the last 2 years, more reforms have been done than in the last 20 years. I remember very well our dramatic sessions we had 2 years ago, when we've been extremely worried about the potential collapse of the Ukrainian economy, when we've been just watching with great attention what's happening to the exchange rate, what's happening to the stability of the national currency, and we kind of tend to forget that this was just 2 years ago. So what happens in that? Situation is stabilized. Banking sector has been cleaned up, and I'm very glad to say that we see growth coming back to Ukraine. And I think it goes very well with the picture we see across the European Union. We just had the State of the European Union speech of our President, Jean-Claude Juncker, but we're also very happy to note that over the last 2 years, we are growing finally in every member state across the EU, and that we got under the control our deficits, and the euro is very healthy and the strong currency. So I want to say that even in these economic cycles, we see more and more convergence and more approximation. I think that over the last few years, our relationship between Ukraine and Europe became much stronger. I'm very glad to say that we have now visa-free regime with Ukraine. I remember very well how difficult and complex it was in my country to negotiate entry into the Schengen system, how technically it was demanding and how many benchmarks you have to meet. So to achieve it is a great deal, and I'm really thrilled that that many young Ukrainians, that many businessmen, that many tourists from Ukraine go and visit neighbors, visit European countries, because it's making our relationship much more personal. We've been working very hard with our Ukrainian partners on the two, I would say, landmark and key instruments for change, for closer cooperation. And this is association agreement, and this is deep, comprehensive free trade agreement. And I have to underline that the process didn't finish with a signature. It is just the starting point. And we see how much it improved our trade, that over the first months of this year, our trade grew by 25%, and I have to say both ways. But still, I see that we can use these two instruments much better, that the potential is great. There are some additional reforms which need to be done in the sector of agriculture, in other areas, just really to benefit even more from these instruments and from the potentials they are creating. So from the perspective of the European Union, both documents are the best tool for further modernization, for making our relationship stronger, and for creating new opportunities for economic development in Ukraine. As you know, I'm responsible for energy, climate change, reforms in the transport sectors, and research and innovation, the energy union of the EU. I know that we will have a possibility to discuss all these issues in the afternoon at a special session, but what I would like to say is that there is tremendous potential for Ukraine to become energy hub, to be exporter of energy. If we work together on energy efficiency, if we work together on using these new technologies in Ukraine, and if we use the potential Ukraine has for transit, for gas exploration, and for trading with the European partners. And I have to underline also at this session that continuation of the important gas transit through Ukraine in post-2019 period is a top priority for the European Union. So if you allow me to conclude, because I know that we are under severe time pressure, I would say that the best response to the situation in the East, the best recipe for the success would be to build strong, democratic, and prosperous Ukraine. The country which would serve as a model of the transition, country which would prove that the reforms are paying off, country which could really be the model to its neighbors. And I remember that this is very often difficult. The transition takes time. Transition is painful. That you always have certain pressures once you go further, to go a little bit backwards. So I believe that now we are in a crucial times, and all of us, the friends of Ukraine, have to help this great country to reform, to bring all these new approaches to make Ukraine a big success and to make Ukraine a prosperous country. When I was entering the room this morning, I told Calvin, oh my goodness, everyone is here. And he told me, no, some are still coming. So this just proves that how many friends Ukrainian has, how they want to work together with you, the Ukrainians. And I want to reassure you 100% that European Union is behind the Ukraine, and we want every success for Ukraine and its people. Thank you very much, Richard.